Smile.
You gotta smile. Yeah, show your teeth. Show your teeth.
Candid camera.
What's my part straight?
Okay, Elmer.
Well, I guess I'm supposed to start this out. I'm Elmer. I was born in 1915. I'm now 73 years old. I was the third in the family. I was the second boy. And right now I'm the oldest of the ones that are left.
I'm Gilman, and I was born in 1917, and I'm 70 years old. And I was the fourth child of the family. The fifth child is, oh yeah, Myrtle. Myrtle was the oldest. She died of cancer in 1982. And Jens was the oldest boy, and he drowned in 1931. And after me is Solveig, who lives in Portland, Oregon, and she was born in 1920. And then it's Shockey, who lives in Moorhead, and he is 5 years younger than I am, though he would be 66. And I'll let it take Robert to take over.
How about Ardell?
Oh, Ardell. Ardell, that's right. Ardell comes after Shockey, and he died. And last year, that would be 87, and he was 62 years old. Now comes Robert.
All right. I am Robert, and I am the next to the youngest. And I was born in 1927, so I am now 61 years old. I can mention Ardell a little bit. We were less than 2 years apart, and we grew up pretty much doing all the same things together. And when he passed away last year, it was a big shock, and we think about him every day. Okay, Marlo?
I'm Marvel. I was born in 1929, I believe. Makes me 58 years old. I was the baby of the family. I had all the hand-me-downs. When Bud grew out of pants, I grew into it. And I was never a baby of the family. It's the oldest that's the baby of the family. The highlight of my life was when Pauline and Gilman came back from California. We wound up getting a Sears catalog out of the toilet. We got regular toilet paper.
Well,
That was a highlight. And I thank you for coming home and making that change.
yeah.
That's all for me,
Okay.
for right now.
That's cool. How about that?
I think
Go to school.
that camera's still on me.
Elmer?
Where? Who wants to talk about going to school?
Yeah. Well, I remember going to the country school. We lived the school was just a short distance from the farm, and we always walked. We walked across the alfalfa field, as it used to be, or hay field. And we even had hot lunches in our country school, which was very unusual. We had a basketball court. We played basketball.
Outside.
Yeah, outside.
That basket was way too high,
It
remember
was
that?
a little too high. But we even had a team we played Lindos. I remember. We played Lindos. Of course, they were a bigger school. Much better than Cooper.
I think all of us walked across that field to school.
Yes.
All of us went to that same school. And that was, I remember every day when we'd go home, when we were excused, that was a race out the door. And sometimes Ardell would win, sometimes I would win. Whoever got around the corner.
I never won.
There
Whoever
used to be a
get around
fence
there.
around. Used to be a fence around there. We used to get so we'd come running and then we'd jump the fence.
Oh, we never had a fence.
Cat pasture.
remember one time heading back to school after having lunch at home. Go home for lunch on the bicycle, and somebody had parked the disc right in that pathway as you go around the outhouse, and I came into my bicycle, go wow, right into that disc.
See, when Shockey was first grade and I was in eighth grade, so I used to pull him in the wintertime. I pulled him to school on a sled. Had a sled, pull him on across there.
I suppose one thing we can do now, maybe right now, is talk about our dad and some of the things we remember about our dad.
Yeah.
Do you have
Very good
something
idea.
over? Do you remember?
Well,
If you can't think of something,
Think of something.
go ahead,
I'll
start
start
it out.
something.
Go ahead, start it out.
I can't remember. You people had told me about this. I was out in the blacksmith, not hardest shop with Dad, and I wanted to chew. Dad said, yeah. I said, you're big enough. You can chew. He said, I'll fix it up here for you. And he said, he put a little wood in the stove. Got that going, and he put a stump in front of the stove. He said, now you sit on here, he said, and he gave me a chunk. He said, now when you have to spit, he said, you spit on the stove. And I sat there and I chewed and I spit on the stove. It wasn't long before I started turning green. And out I went. He caught it from Mom. We got it inside.
Yeah, I used to spend his winters, you know, fixing the harnesses. Like that shop had two rooms.
Yep.
One was for harness making and one for blacksmithing.
I got blacksmith hammer.
Well, we always headed out to the harness room in the wintertime because it was always warm, you know.
Oh.
We had kept it very warm in there. But as far as the blacksmith shop was concerned, that was always a lot of interest to me. And he did teach me a lot about blacksmithing. I used to make hitches and clevises and punches and chisels,
Yep.
and even the knife, you know, from a file.
Yep.
You know, all those things, you know. That's what I enjoyed.
Made knives out of cylinder teeth from the thrashing machine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember Dad working in the shop too, and when he was fixing harnesses, and of course I wasn't in school yet, and we'd be out there with him. I know he built me a sled to haul wood in so that he could, for burning, you know, and made a real nice sled. That was my job. And I still remember falling asleep in there, you know, I used to fall asleep after a while. And I say, I always remember my dad, he's being kind, you know, when we sat around the table, you know, if we got out of line, we'd get the elbow, and we felt so ashamed, you know, he never wanted it to happen. But actually, Mother was she was a little tougher on us than Dad. Dad was always kind. As far as he never got, like when he woke in the morning, it was so gentle, or if he woke you at noon, really so gentle, you know.
I never got a spanking from Dad.
She was a disciplinarian.
Yeah.
No, I don't remember getting one either.
But Mother, remember when she'd get mad at you? Go out and make the whip.
You had to go out in the woods and make your own stick, you know, and bring it to her, and she'd.
And if she was still mad, and the whip wasn't good enough, go back and make another one.
I remember when Elmer stuck his elbow out like that, and
Ow, ow, ow,
and
ow,
Mother
ow.
hit his elbow, and he got the worst of it that time.
That was ow, 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 ow.
Then she went to the wood box to come back with a stick.
Ah.
But
Yeah.
she didn't use it.
I've got a kind of an interesting thing to mention. Brother Jens, you know, he drove a car to high school, and Elmer and I rode along. And you know, this car that we had was a 1925 Dodge Business Sedan, very fancy old car. It was one that Elmer Brunsdale had owned, and it was leather upholstery throughout, 4-cylinder. It also had a silent starter. You guys realize what a silent starter?
Never heard of it.
Silent starter was, there was a chain. There was a chain instead of sprockets for driving the seat. It was a fabulous thing, and it was difficult to steer. And it was a miracle we ever lived through it, because he'd drive fast, Jen drove fast, and we went through the old,
Never any breaks.
oh, never.
Did you ever ride with
No
a bus?
breaks on.
Anyway, we survived it. But I remember that, those trips to high school,
No
that
breaks.
old black sedan.
I remember I took it to Mayville one time, going through Main Street. Somebody stopped quick to let somebody off. No place to go. Hit him, and the cop was right there, and he bawled the person out for stopping too quick.
You got out of it free.
Yeah, he did. But I had
I like
no
to
breaks.
mention, our mother was a wonderful cook. And when we had the big cruise, you know, in the summertime, we'd always eat in that room.
Summer-
porch. Yeah, the porch.
Summer kitchen.
Where our Dell put a family room now out in the barn. And it was just big enough for the table, dining room table, and we'd always eat out there in the summertime because I guess you'd get away from the hot kitchen stove and there's windows all around, fresh air could come through. But one thing we learned is when she brought the food, it would always go one way around the table. She might start something a little ways down then, but it always was one way around the table. And I still can't convince my family to do that. The food comes here, pretty soon it's crisscrossing. It's so frustrating to me because that's something that was just automatic, you know. It went one way, everything
But
went
she
one
used to
way.
serve sometimes two plates, one at each end. And I
Yeah.
remember Marlo always wanted from that plate to the other end.
Oh, yeah. There's always the better pieces over there. Well, I remember Mother frying special steaks for every person that came by there. And I think we had hired men like up to 10, 12 hired men at a time. They'd walk by and they wanted tender, they wanted well done, or they wanted it rare, and she fried every one of them separate for them. Nice big
Do you
steaks.
remember the Sunday morning breakfast? That was always waffles and eggs. Waffles and eggs, and sometimes she'd make waffles for all the thrashing crew. She'd have the bread basket just full, be full of waffles.
What was the Sunday evening again? That's usually potato salad and
Dried venison, you know, and
Cold
ham.
Cold
Not dried
canned
venison.
chicken, too.
Could be,
Yeah.
Oh, yes, we had
Dried
cold-
beef.
cold canned chicken quite often.
Sunday evening was. Of course, on the 4th of July, usually the spring chickens were ready, so she would fix a bunch of those with fresh potatoes from the garden.
And we try and make ice cream.
She
Try.
never hesitated to
Try
chop the,
make ice cream.
chop the heads off of the chickens either.
What?
She didn't hesitate to chop the heads
Oh,
off.
heavens.
She did that, not always, but she did it whenever she had to.
I remember canning chickens. For a week, we killed 200 and some chickens, and she canned all.
Let's not lie now, like Shockey said. We're sure we don't lie.
Well, I'm sure we did.
Yeah, it could be.
It was, we were many days of carrying.
you get so you don't even want to see a chicken for a while.
The smell in the basement was unreal. Remember the lye soap that Mother made
Yeah.
in the
Well, I got
How
something.
about the
I wanna-
lunches in the fields? You were gonna talk about that.
I want to mention something about the field. You know, this was when I was hoping to go to the university. No money was short in those days.
That was 30s.
Yeah, and no, it was 34.
Behind the 30s.
34 when I was going to start. And so my dad told me, he said, if you want to, you can have that field a week. And whatever you can get out of it will be for you to go to college. So I don't know if he suggested it or what, but anyway, I went to Stoupies and I rented a big swatter, and then I hired them to come and combine it. So they came and combined it.
remember that.
They came and combined that stuff, and of course it was very poor. And I hauled it up to Junction, and Nick Norgard was a good friend, you know, all the time, and he knew what this was, what this wheat was going to do. So on the ticket he wrote University Wheat, and then in big letters he wrote tough. So, in other words, it wasn't quite dry.
That's how they tested grain in those days, you know. It's tough, see. If it, you know, if you had a good slippery box that slid out fast, We had one truck that had a rough box. It's tougher today, you know, I mean.
About where was this, about, no,
Well, that
Well,
was,
yeah,
that was stove piece too?
Stoughby's for combining something too.
that was
but
flax.
That was a different deal.
That was a different deal. What
Ardell said that.
That was flax on Hans Hansen's.
The tan about it, no.
Oh, man, last we know how to church dog now, he said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You better interpret that,
Do you-
whatever.
Do you remember,
That
do you remember?
means
Bert
how many
Stumpy.
loads of, screedings have you hauled today?
You know,
Junk.
you would know that junk, you
Yeah.
know.
How much wheat did you get from?
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember.
stuff.
It certainly wasn't enough to pay for 1 year of college.
Not the way you live.
Oh,
Well, did you first start cutting that with the binder and then you decided to get the combine after?
no, we got the shorter,
Right away.
and I did it.
I remember starting to cut wheat on the Bestwood land there. It was all black with rust. And I thought that was going to be college wheat.
Last year was 36, wasn't it?
And I remember riding on the tractor with them, and one of you guys stopped the D and reached over and rubbed out the heads, you know, and with nothing in them, you know. But the wheat was nice and high, and
That was seriously.
yeah, there was nothing in it. And but it stood there so nice. I thought that probably was college wheat too.
What year was it we rented from Ed Henderson? But, you know, first Benny came with a sample, and my dad said, if you find anything there worth harvesting, you can have it. Then Gilbert came. He said, you find anything, you know, that's worth harvesting, you can have whatever it is. So then he went over to Ed.
Ed
He said,
Henderson?
I don't think this stuff is worth harvesting. Oh, Ed says, I want it harvested, he said. He wanted cut, so we cut it and chopped it, and then Ed come and says, I don't think it's worth thrashing. But then said, it's gonna be thrashed if there isn't a kernel in it, because Ed had to pay half the thrashing.
Sure. You remember when we came with that first 17 combine, number 17 combine? And Anton and Dad, you know, have been running a thrash machine all these years. Anton was up on top of the combine and Dad was on the John Deere D tractor. They swathed rye up on the, what?
Miracorder.
Miracorder, yeah. Those big swaths, you know, the big tall rye. And Dad had it in intermediate, I'm sure. Swung into that swath and ka-wah, everything stopped. All the neighbors were around watching.
You see that, and it rained, so they didn't have patience, and they went and turned it.
Bunched it up.
And then so it came, so the butt ends wanted to come first. And, you know, get up into that feeder room, and it had to turn. It wouldn't turn, you know, so we had to stand there with.
Was that the first combine you had?
Huh?
Was that the first combine?
First
That
big
was the
one.
first
That
big
was the
one. We
first
had that
big
little
combine.
grasshopper before, but this was that first big one.
What year was that?
Right after the war, the first combine sold in the
During
area.
the war, kind of. It was during rationing.
Carl Enger was in line to buy that first. And they had to buy it in the fall, didn't they? And he decided not to, and Dad bought it. I think, wasn't that the story?
Yeah, well, see, Bert came out and, the rationing board was gonna give it to somebody by Hillsborough, but Bert didn't want to go to Hillsborough, so he came up and first he tried Carl and then he tried my dad. And he said, I wanted to stay in this area. So they made a deal.
Well, Carl thought it was too
So that
late
would
in
have
the
been
year.
before, during the war then.
Yeah, that was during
He
rationing.
thought it was too late in the year to buy a combine.
Yeah. He didn't want to take the chance.
What's that?
One way or the other, it was,
Yeah,
the crop hadn't been decided yet.
Well, anyway, I was the unsuspecting one that ended up starting out with that little
Little
number,
B, or
with a
the
number six combine on
Flax.
rye,
And I
Was it on rye?
on rye.
And I was to
And
go
it-
for it.
And it was on the mile. You know, you got down there, you wouldn't even see that on it, because the rye was so tall, and we used to bind it to swath it.
Yeah. Well, then, wasn't Bud with you on that?
I don't know.
I hauled grain.
You all drained with that Nash.
Is that right? You were a good grain hauler.
There wasn't much grain there to haul, though.
But I remember too, in that rye, you tried it about every day for about 2 weeks, you know, and it wasn't dry. And they tried, and they tried, and they'd plug up. And
Oh, plug up.
I think that was the last deal that Anton and Dad tried to run that combine on. I think it got turned over to Ardell and somebody else after that.
I suppose a lot of the nieces and nephews saw pictures of the old thrashing, Minneapolis thrashing rig that our uncle and dad had together. That was always a big thrill when that was stored at Uncle Ted's farm. And of course, about middle of the summer, they would go to get that, pull it home to our place, and Anton Besser would start fixing on it.
Under the cottonwood tree.
And you could hear the rumble coming down the road. You know, that old big Minneapolis tractor had a special noise to it, you know. That was always a thrill, wasn't it?
Always a thrill to wait for that whole train of things to come. Then,
Like these jets now, they go so fast that there's much, but there was a big excitement because, you know, it took them a long time to go from there.
Oh, gosh.
You know, to watch them, you know, you'd climb up in the windmill and watch them coming.
I don't imagine that thing went more than a mile and a half an hour or something.
How about that?
That'd be all.
it was a good alarm clock when they started it, the thrashing in the morning. That thing started banging and starting it would wake up.
Well, they
You younger boys don't remember this, but Elmer does. You know, our dad said he had ordered 3 wheelbarrows for us, and we even thought wheelbarrows was okay, you know. But he'd ordered these wheelbarrows through the implement dealer in Portland, and but of course he had, you know, took a while for him to come, and then one day he come home and he had 3 new bicycles for us. That was the day, wasn't it?
You guys got bicycles that way?
Brand new bicycles.
You know how I got my bicycle? Mother says if you keep this garden clean until your birthday, you'll get a bicycle for your birthday. That garden had to be, what, 15 acres big? What? 25?
How about 125?
About 125. I think it was that whole south quarter of the North 40.
Don't you think we've done some work for those bicycles?
I doubt it.
Oh, yeah.
And that was you know, and I kept that garden clean, and then I was able to get this bicycle for my birthday. And it was a mate to Marvin Hagen's bicycle.
How old were you?
Oh, shucks. About a 7th grader, I suppose, 6th grader.
I don't think, I never did have a bike. Never had a bike.
We didn't. We must have left one over for you.
Well, that's what I had parts of, well, I used Ardell's bike a lot.
A big highwayman.
And parts of those bikes that you guys had, you know, and he'd stored them in the, well, I guess it was a bike shed you fixed up. And then the sow pigs got in there and bent them all up, knocked them down. See, I had parts of those.
You didn't explain who the 3 bikes were for, and how old you were when that happened.
Well, I wasn't very old because I couldn't even ride it. You know.
This is Jensen, you know, yeah, we practiced, everybody in the neighborhood.
I
learned to ride bikes
remember
up
I
there.
had to have 5-gallon pails spread along the road. Whenever I fall down, I'd have that to get up and get started again.
We
you know.
used to push it up the elevator and then
Get on and roll down, get
get
started.
down and roll down, then we get going.
I've got an incident that was very important to me, and I felt so bad about it. That was when Dad got that 1933 Dodge truck, brand new.
The red
And I thought, yes, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna haul grain with that new truck. You know what happened? George Quealy was chosen to drive that new truck, and I had to go out and plow.
With horses or
No,
tractor?
with a tractor.
You talking about trucks then? Dad bought the truck that you wound up with was
Well,
1946,
48.
48. I was the one chosen to take care of that one, and I took care of it.
You were lucky.
You bet, boy. I took care of it. I waxed that truck, and I changed the oil on it regular, and I greased it. And I think that's the only truck that was ever taken care of like that.
I suppose we should talk about Shockey now. I remember
Oh, yeah.
years ago.
He's a horseman.
This is your chance.
Years ago, then we
Cultivating corn.
cultivating corn, and he was kind of the horseman. And I was just old enough to get the oldest team there was, and cultivated a few 1 year or so with horses. But Shockey would get the double row with 4 horses, and the best one. But he was kind of the horseman, and never did drive tractor very much. He went to college and then coached. And didn't get around to
You
driving.
never drove a tractor.
Not very much, because he was in the Navy, and those years when he probably would have driven it quite a bit. Just
Well,
for-
I don't think this would be complete unless we detail a little bit about what happened with Jenstrom. It was 1931 when everything burnt, the crop had burnt, and then 105 degrees for quite a few days. And so the crop was shot, so we salvaged something. We went out and mowed the wheat fields, and then we were stacking it, bucking it, walking behind there, and we were so coated with mud, we were black. So the whole crew, about 6 or 7 of us, were going swimming down by the Mabel Dam. And we had Olav Bo was a big Norwegian. He was a real good swimmer, a lot of buoyancy, and he'd been towing us up and down the river, no problem. And we've been swimming farther than look across, so finally got a discussion about whether we should swim across. So I said, well, he said, do you have any trouble? He says, you just call, I'll help you. Good. No problem. So I swam across, and Jen swam across. And then, of course, we didn't have bathing suits on, so we heard a motorboat coming, so we kind of ran back to some trees for a while. And when they went back again, then I swam back, and Jen started. And he kind of panicked. He started going as fast as he could. I mean, I think he figured, well, I'll go as fast as I can, and then he hollered for help. Got about halfway. The Olaus went out, and he could tow us, but he didn't know how to handle a person in trouble. So Jen got his arms around his neck, and they both went down. So I swam out. Don't know why, but I couldn't stand and watch. I swam out there. They came up again, and about the time I got there, then they went down. So I turned around and came back. And Olaus came up and he floated to the other shore because he had so much buoyancy. And anyway, then of course we Julius Brosset and Anton, I don't know, anyway, we took the car and we went over to the swimming hole that was on the other side of the bridge where the lifeguards were and stuff, like Six Garrison and I suppose it was Ida Gutterberg. Then they started diving and Sig came up with
Was Anton and those guys along too?
Julius.
Julius. Were they snorting in?
Oh, they were in swimming.
Yeah.
And but there's no question in my mind, if I'd ever gotten a hold of Jens, I'd have gone down.
Oh, you would have gone too.
No.
He never really surfaced again.
No.
Uh-uh.
No, once they went, Olaus came up again.
Olaf came, but Jens never came up.
So I was on my way out there when they went down.
I seem to remember that when that happened. I don't know if it's just to hear talk about it or stuff, but seems like we were visiting over at Uncle's.
You were.
And I just remember
Art
driving home from Uncle's.
Art Carlson took me out there to tell the folks.
Yeah. And I just remember driving home and hearing this, and then just in my mind, it just seems to me, how can water swallow somebody? See, this was, I was just a kid, and it's just, I always thought, that's what I was thinking at the time.
Then I had to go over to Myrtle and George, they were there. Their farm.
You were only 4 years
Tell
old.
them.
I suppose I was only 4 years old, but I just remember this, Jens was gone, see? And how can water swallow somebody? That's kind of what I thought, see?
Anyway, I thought that should be down on the part of
Yeah.
that. So now you can go ahead.
Well, Jens had graduated from high school, but was he thinking about going to college?
Yes, he was planning on going to Marquette.
He wanted to take up aviation,
That was the school he's been in contact with.
He wanted to take up flying,
He was taller than all of us, wasn't he?
Yeah. But, well, probably not any taller than you or Shockey.
Pictures looked like it.
Yeah, but he was thin. Yeah, he was probably,
About 6'1", I suppose.
6'1".
Where he was at, though. That's
Yeah,
a
he
bit
was-
taller than us.
He was probably
Yeah.
a little bit.
That was one thing I wanted, you know, Dad always put nicknames on all of us, you know. And I guess that's where all the nicknames came from. Everybody asked, where did Shockey ever get a name like Shockey? But as far as I know, it came from the fact that he went out with the Shockers, and, you know, and they decided to nickname him. And Dad nicknamed him Shockey. He gave him a pitchfork, I think,
Oh,
that he was supposed to use, and he
was still in use then.
still in use, you know. Like, and then the end of it, then you had a groove in it.
Do you want me to go back a little bit?
Lift that up.
Or,
Are you going?
I'm going.
Oh, okay. All right, we're back at it.
Back at nicknames.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nicknames.
We just figured out Gilman was a who's cut. That means the
House cat.
house cat, I guess. And he called me Budgeon and Bud. And I'm trying to think of, and then Solvig, that was Kulla.
Kulla.
And I guess that means old cat, cat without horns. Marlo was Thrills.
What does that mean?
I don't know what that means.
Trouble.
That means a good man.
Trouble.
Ardell was Toot. I don't know where you got that either. But he was Toot all the time.
Yeah, that's good.
I don't know about Elmer, if he had a nickname, Elmer.
I don't think so.
Had to have been something.
What about Myrtle then?
Hadn't started that yet, maybe.
Probably not.
Sometimes they call me the lazy farmer, I don't know. Remember, that was a comic strip in that time.
Yeah.
It was the lazy
Well,
farmer.
you were settled with it bad enough when your second name was Sylvester.
Yeah.
Well, what
Yeah.
was your nickname, Bud? Besides Bud?
Budgeon and
No, there's another one.
Twoghouse.
Bug House, yeah. I don't know what that came from either. Finger up your nose, trying to get the boogers out.
Well, you know, we were discussing this, we got these bicycles. And then we had to build a bicycle shed.
Oh, sure.
Bicycle house. So Jens, of course, was the main engineer, and Elmer and I helped, and we gathered up lumber from all over, you know, all odds and ends. And we didn't get anything really good, you know, it was all.
We didn't have so much trouble finding boards, but
No,
we had
fun.
a good time finding nails. We'd straighten all the
Straighten
nails.
nails.
Yeah. Okay, we did that, and we got a house built that we could store our bicycles in. We had two doors even, one to go in and one to go out again. Well, and then eventually Grandma decided to use it for a brooding house, didn't she? She had chickens in there, and she used it that way for some time. When Pauline and I moved onto the farm, they were willing to give us that old bicycle house for a playhouse. So then it was moved over to the Melsing farm where we lived. And it was used there for made good use out of it many years.
That might be something we could mention too, is like Grandma, all the jobs she had, and that was one of them, was to find a broody hen and get it to set on the eggs and hatch out. For years she did it that way. I remember then when they ordered chicks and the brooder house, and she had to walk back and forth there so many times and check, you know, for the heat, check, you know, she was a new thing for her. And they were getting pretty big, and they were out, you know, and then a rainstorm came, and of course she got over there and they were all piled up. So she lost a bunch, you know, after all that struggle.
She
But
lost. Yeah, go ahead.
all of that stuff was kind of new, you know, because
The
she hadn't had a bunch of chickens like that before.
Used a kerosene brooder, which was unpredictable. I remember one of the first times too that she got it too hot in there, and they moved out to the corners, came over there. That was when they were little chicks. They were piled up, and she just spread them out.
All these things were so new to her, she just couldn't figure out how, you know, they never thought they'd pile up from getting rain, you know. Well, there's that many, she wasn't used to that many.
Didn't have the old brooder hens to sit on them when the rain, you know.
The hen would sit on them, and if it rained and pour, and the little chick would be dry there.
Those,
And another thing that, you know, how the chicks came when they ordered them from a hatchery down in Minnesota, I think Albert Lee, and they'd come by mail.
Yeah.
They'd come to the
Post office.
post office. that was not unusual coming to the post office and hear these beep, 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 beep from chicks all over the place, and people were doing it then.
I can tell you about one time I got chicks, and we'd had a big snowstorm when when the chicks came. And when I went over to the brooder house where I was going to go in, there was a snowdrift. I didn't hold the box and slide down the snowdrift, open the door and go in. There was a big drift right outside the door.
When you got chicks. Too early.
And you
It
see,
was a late snowstorm.
all the housewives, you know, that was, they'd raise turkeys, you know, everybody had some turkeys. And that was kind of got to be their spending money, you know, what they got out of those turkeys, you know.
But wasn't it egg money too?
Egg money in the.
Oh, yeah, but that was groceries.
Egg
They all
money.
going to trade that for
Oh,
groceries,
yeah.
but the turkey money was kind of their money, you know, and they'd all have some turkeys. And then,
The last years when I was involved, Mom would have the egg money and the cream money, cream check. And then when we needed some money, it was always to go to her purse and get one of the cream checks or one of the egg checks.
yeah, the cream checks they used to cash, but the eggs they always traded into the grocery store for groceries, you know.
China closet. Checks were
Yeah,
all
they were
in
up
China
there.
closet.
Marla, you knew where they kept them.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt
Another-
about that.
You know, I never let my kids do it, but I know when we went to high school, we could write checks. We'd write checks. George Strand by Robert.
I did that all through college.
Yeah. And if we needed money, we could go to the Red and White store, and he could give us money, and he'd put it on our charge account.
$1 at a time.
50 cents. 50 cents for a
Dollar,
loaf.
it was all the dollar for me.
Anyway, on these turkeys, you know, then in the fall, these outfit that used to come around, they pack them in town here.
Campbell's. Kimball?
Kimball.
Kimball.
We'd pick them, clean them, we'd stick them, you know, and bleed them. Have a big deal then where we got these turkeys ready, and then they bring them in to cool them overnight, and then they bring them in and they pack them in barrels.
We never had turkeys on the farm when I was growing up. Never saw a turkey on our farm.
We didn't.
I can barely remember having turkeys once.
Remember the one time they, one hen that snuck off, you know, and had her brood. They kind of lived in the wild, and then they were over at George Anderson's trees. They used to roost over there. So we couldn't catch them, so.
Talking about it.
Dad went, we went over there when they were up in the trees then, and
Kind of
Dad
at night.
used to rifle and shot through the head.
Well, that's if you could hit them through that. Now, we're not supposed to be lying, you know.
No, then I remember they sewed up those heads again, you know, because they were supposed to have the head on, you know, when they brought them in. See.
Talking about George Anderson, I'd always sneak over there and get candy. And I was told not to go over there anymore.
Where was George Anderson? Better tell him where that
Well,
is.
George Anderson is where Johnny Olson lives now. And I would sneak down the ditch on my hands and knees on the ditch to get over to George Anderson's. And I came over there the one time, and I don't remember this for sure, but at least everybody's telling about it. And I got over there, and Ed Gullickson and George Anderson were doing some work with wood. And George says, "There's candy in the brewsk," he said to me. And I didn't believe this. And I said, "No, I think I'll go inside and get candy in the house." So I went in the house and I got candy from Mrs. George Anderson.
I remember another little thing about.
Yeah.
We're talking about.
You're on.
On the farmer store deal, Grandpa Jens had a first mortgage in it, and that's, my dad wound up with that when they settled the estate. So,
The farmer's
he had-
store.
he had this first mortgage, and we were never getting any money, but we had to, you know, charge everything there. I mean, the groceries and clothing, whatever, went against his loan. Well, then, they got into a very desperate situation, and Ray Power pleaded with my dad that, he says, if you'll sign over first mortgage, he said, then we can get enough money to operate and keep going. Otherwise, we'll have to close. So signed over. Well, it didn't go very long afterwards, and then in order to get anything back out of it, Dad had to pay out the first mortgage he did. So he had to pay off that loan, in order to salvage.
Then he ended up with the building.
Then he ended on up with the building. See, the first time they didn't have mortgage on the fixtures, and then they got on the fixtures too. So that was pretty much worthless to me.
You better tell where the farmer store is. What building is the farmer store?
Well, that's what is now the George's.
Grocery store.
Yeah.
It was a very modern store in that day, you know, that had all the
Tube deal, you
Yeah,
know, they rolled
vacuum-
and the
vacuum tube.
secretary sitting up there in the office
Make
and
them
made the
change.
change, you know, and sent it back down and those.
And I remember when Dad ended up with that store, then they were cleaning out stuff, you know, with the boxes full of overshoes, you know, and stuff, but there was only one of each kind. It was never a pair, you know.
Button shoes, all kinds of button shoes.
And those reflectors for the
Everything was
lamps
worthless.
that you put on the wall and all the.
Those they should have saved.
We used them for targets with a BB gun and 22s, and we shot
Yeah,
out
whole
boxes
boxes of
full of
them.
them.
Could have paid off the mortgage with
We
those
could have
today.
paid off the mortgage
And a whole
now.
box full of those things.
Yep. That little pickup that you're
Those
talking about.
brackets that fit on the wall, you know, and those
Yeah.
reflectors.
That truck that you're talking about, that 34 Dodge truck, the little one, that didn't have dual wheels, right? Single rear wheel. How many loads did we take out of the farmer's store with that little truck? Many.
What year was this about?
I remember it. I don't remember.
Before World War II.
Must have been before World War II, all right.
It was around 36, 37.
Well, I remember it.
Oh,
I was born in 32.
I can remember that farmer store was never a joy to my dad. It was something he always worried about. The roofs would start leaking, and then of course you'd get strangers to come and fix that he never trusted very much, and it would be very expensive.
It was nothing but a white elephant.
It was very trying to my dad.
And the people that we had that lived upstairs, a great majority of them
Didn't
pay their rent.
And Dad was not the kind to go up there and ask
No.
for the rent.
I used to go up there quite a bit for them, but I didn't enjoy it either, and I didn't always have too good luck.
Mother always thought it was okay. She struggled with it. She thought a lot of times those people had a home, you know, even if they didn't get the rent. And she always thought, you know, it's okay. Let's keep that farmer store. But it was something my dad didn't like. He worried too much about it always.
Well, then finally, you know, then they closed it down then because Phil Hawkins were scared of fire, you know, because those guys up there were firing wood and coal in their stoves. Until we remodeled it. Then we
What people lived up there?
Oh, Knip Aiken and.
Didn't people live up there when we were painting it for the Johnsons?
Colonel George lived up there.
Or didn't anybody live up there? Maybe not.
Knuddy and his wife, you know, they
Maybe
both
not.
lived up there until they both died. They both died up there.
I remember Solvig and her classmate, I think it was probably Frida Erickson, lived up there.
Yeah, and Jemson.
Caroline. And Wallberg Hugfus was kind of their mother that took care of them and
Yeah.
cooked for them, and they lived up there. I remember we came in for a class play, and I suppose we came early in the afternoon, and then Wallberg cooked us supper, and I can remember telling, now go to the bathroom before you go to the play, you know.
Changing the subject a little bit. Bud, do you remember when we got axes for Christmas? I was about fourth grader, I suppose. You were about a sixth grader, and I was about an eighth grader. And Christmas came, and we were really looking forward to toys of some kind, you know. And we got axes. But it was kind of enjoyable. First thing in the morning, we were out there chopping wood like mad. Boy, that pile of stumps got smaller, and the split pile got bigger in a
That's how we
hurry.
used to spend our Christmas vacation, splitting the wood, you know, for the next year we'd stand there, split wood, about 4 or 5 guys around the pile.
We used to get Christopher Hagen, he was kind of the mainstay.
Well, he'd be there and cut down the trees and
He'd
and
stay
do a
there
lot of sawing.
most of it was
But,
done.
but grilling, usually we waited till it got real cold, you know. Christmas time was about the time for that.
Those axes that we got that year, Ardell's and mine were identical. Yours
Yeah,
was a
mine
little
was smaller.
And we chopped wood with Hans Hansen and those guys, you know.
Ed Gullickson.
Talking about Christopher Hagen and his axe, you know, he was the guy that nobody ever touched his axe.
Oh, I suppose.
And he chopped and never got the handle there chipped, you know, he never missed. It was
Any idea where those axes
Carried
are
the
now?
whetstone right with him and he'd sharpen his axe up a little bit, you know.
nobody touched it.
He could fell trees,
In a hurry.
you know, just.
And you know, he was not a big man, he wasn't a heavy, strong man. But he took for his age.
And you watch him chop, you know, the big splinter every time. The big.
He only learned to work with his hands. He never cared about driving horses or anything like that. It was spy pitch, you know, or pitch manure. We'd get him over there when they're gonna load out the manure piles, and he'd stand in the pile and pitch all day, you know.
Who
load
was
up
this
the-
man?
Christopher Hagen.
I know, but who?
He,
Was he
his
related
daughter
to
lives
him?
over in Mayville, but he was,
Mrs. Jurgensen is his daughter.
he homesteaded out in Grenora, and then his wife
You
got
know
sick
Mr.
out there and
Jurgensen.
died. So he left, he brought his two kids up this way and left his land and never went back.
I didn't even realize that he was married.
Yeah, he had Ole.
Ole and Mrs. Jurgensen, whatever her name
Yeah,
is.
but
Was he the man they found dead in his car down by Ted Strand?
no, that was Andrew Bermadon.
Ramadan.
Oh, Christopher. He just kind of never had a home really. He just out there in that odd Jellrite area. He'd spend so much time up there, and then he'd come to our place and work with the wood, and then he'd be there and pitch manure, and you know, a certain job like that, and then he'd move on.
I've got something I'd like to mention. I think it'll be interesting to the kids. And that was a fellow by the name of Andrew Vermedal. He used to go around and he would buy a beef, or he'd buy hogs, whatever, from a farmer, and then he'd come back towards evening when it started to cool off, and he'd butcher this animal and hang it in the tree, and he would have every part of that animal contracted for. In other words, he knew exactly where it was going, a quarter here, a beef here, I mean a hind quarter here and a front here, and so on.
It's got off from court till the back court.
And then in the morning, he'd be there, and early in the morning, you know, this was 4 o'clock in the morning, no doubt. And he'd take this thing down then, and he'd cut it up into pieces that, and deliver it.
And then when he did this, you remember the dog King?
Yeah.
If you weren't around butchering, you could not get over there. The dog wouldn't let you come over. And that dog would lay and watch that animal that had been butchered until it was taken
You
down.
were along to
taken away.
start with, it was okay, otherwise
You couldn't get over there. And that same dog, I'm going to tell another story. Now, the same dog. Dad was over in the blacksmith shop, and some gypsy men came over and started talking to him, and they were talking fast. And Dad thought, well, there's something going on here. So he stepped out, and the gypsy women were pulling on the screen door trying to get in, and Mother was holding on the other side. Dad looked at him, he said, you better get your women folks away from the door, or I'm going to send the dog. And away they went. It's all done. And of course, if Dad had said, Sigel, he would have gone. That was King.
Another thing about, I'm sure you young guys would wonder how in the world these ladies could have fresh meat all summer. And the neighbors would go together, like Benny Grundowns and Carl Olsons and Ted Strands and our folks would go together and take turns butchering. And like when Dad butchered, then they'd all come over and get their quarter of it, and then use it up in a few days. Wouldn't have to can it or anything, or very little of it would have to be canned.
Put it in ice cellar, you know.
Yeah. Then, when it was Ted Strand's turn to butcher, then they would butcher, and they'd come over and get. And that's the way they did it in the summertime. And Of course, I suppose mainly the most butchering was done in the fall, when they could freeze it.
Oh,
They
we
salt
were-
brine it too.
We were fortunate in that we had the bunkhouse where we had the
Ice yard.
ice out underneath it. We hauled these big chunks of ice, packed it down there, filled the thing up, and packed it down with sawdust and flax straw,
Yep.
and we had ice all summer.
Yep.
So when you talk about drinking cold water out in the
Field.
hot field, we had it.
You bet.
Too much.
I'll tell, now getting back to Mom and her cooking, and the ice, in the ice box and all that, when I was about 4th grade, I think I started hauling lunch. Drove a 1929 Chrysler that had a vacuum tank in it. You could get about 10, 15 miles and the vacuum tank would go dry. You take off the few things, pour in a little gas, couple it back up again. That's the Chrysler you took to California. And I'd get a few more miles. I'd start out in the morning hauling the shockers out to the shocking field. I'd come back in, and then about, I suppose about 8 o'clock, I'd go around to all the places with ice water. And that'd be ice that'd be taken out of that ice house that you're talking about. And there'd be big milk pails. I'd put a big chunk of ice in there, fill it with water, go fill everybody's water jugs. Then at 9 o'clock, I'd come back, make up the water again, pick up the lunch. The lunch was 2 sandwiches, cake, a cookie, and 2 cups of coffee for everybody. Haul that around. Then I'd come back, and about 10 o'clock, I'd take water back out for all the jugs again. 12 o'clock, go out and get the shockers, bring them in. 1 o'clock, run the shockers back out to the field. About 2 o'clock, fill the water jugs again with water. 3:30, oh wait a minute, we forgot about the dinner. The dinner, Pauline, would either be pork chops or a roast pork, roast beef, one of those, potatoes, a vegetable, bread, and then a dessert like pie or pudding. That was dinner. We called it dinner. Then at lunch in the afternoon, 2 sandwiches, cake, cookie, 2 cups of coffee. Then about 5 o'clock, I suppose, I'd bring water out again. 6 o'clock, go out and get the shockers. They come in for supper. Supper would be pork chops or a roast, pork or beef,
Leftovers.
probably.
Well, she had a
Huge
trick that way. She'd send the leftovers around first. And then she'd come with the fresh.
But she did cook, you know, she cooked tremendous quantities of potatoes so that every night you had enough potatoes for fried
Yeah.
potatoes. You know.
Yeah,
breakfast.
potatoes
It was
would be
always
warmed up,
left over. And then maybe cold beef or something, but if it was
Boy,
pork chops,
I
they were
remember-
fresh.
I
I
remember
used to
being-
make that same run, but I used Old Polly, you know.
I know, but you didn't make as many runs.
I didn't pick up the shockers, they walked home.
Yeah, they used to walk until he got the car.
But anyhow, that supper, I remember it, like you'd have roast for dinner, the supper would be pork chops, and then fried potatoes, that'd be the warm-up. And then the vegetable, and the bread, and most likely,
And sauce.
and sauce.
That's what you had for supper and
For
breakfast.
breakfast too. And now, you think that was the end of that? No, there was a snack before you went to bed.
For some people.
For some people, but
Those
some of the
road
hired men
guys.
didn't get in on that.
For you young guys who
Yeah,
were growing.
family, yeah.
Well, Jack Barrington and those kind of hired men would get in on it, but the older men never got in on that.
I remember when Mother was in Rochester, you know, when Stella Sorensen was out there cooking, and then the Sue Sletton boys were there.
Kermit and Kenneth?
Yeah, and then when Mother used to fry side pork in the morning, and then she'd leave that on the table for the forenoon lunch when they came in, see. And so Kenneth, he knew that there'd been side pork left, but it was gone. See, so he went out in the pantry and found it. Well, Stella come and grabbed it. She says, "I planned to have that for later on," she said. "Now yes, I'll be glad no Mrs. Stone should have my Well, I'll be glad that Mrs. Strand comes back," he said, because he couldn't have a side pork for lunch.
Kermit Sletton and Kenneth Sletton, they were cousins.
They were
They were
close.
cut.
They worked in the wintertime especially and I think they work for something like 50 cents a day.
$12
$50.
$12.
Hermit,
$15
Hermit,
or $12 a month.
I think they're
Hermit
$12
came there
a
and
month.
asked for a job, and my dad offered him $15 a month. And he was so happy, he cried about it. He had a card payments for $16 a month. and he had just oxfords like this, you know.
Yeah.
Go out to do chores. So my dad bought him 4 buckle overshoes.
5 buckle overshoes.
5. Anyway,
And
he
the
was so
overshoes.
proud of those overshoes, you know, you think he bought him a car or something, you know.
I remember him carrying the slop pails to the pigs, and all he had was Oxford through the snow, you know. So when he got the overshoes, that was a treat.
And then, talking about those two guys again, Mother have always had took cherry wine down the basement, and it's the cream separator. Cream separator now is where you can separate the cream from the milk with a machine.
By centrifugal force.
You bet. And of course they'd go down there to separate the cream, and of course they'd always sample the wine. And after a while, of course, the wine was all gone. And I don't know when Mother had that when she wanted to serve that wine, but whenever it was all gone. Kermit and Kenneth had finished it. Well, another time, Kermit and Kenneth were out all corn shocks, corn bundles home, and of course the corn shocks always would twist and they'd freeze down, and the deer would get in them and mess them up, and they'd clean these up. They had a pickaxe with them to chop this loose. Grub axe. Of course, Kenneth was about a 5'10" guy, weighed about 140 pounds. Kermit was about 6'2" or something like that, 200 and some pounds. And of course, Kenneth or Kermit would always grab Kenneth the arm like this and hit him right here. And gee, he'd hit him hard, you know. And I suppose Kenneth thought he was going to get back on him. So he held the pickaxe above his head. Screw you, slaughter your hair. Said, I hit you till you die. That's what it said. And Kermit said, you have to slaughter hard enough, how you say that in Norwegian.
Just go ahead, he said, you know, hit hard enough.
Yeah,
They dropped it.
Be sure, so he just dropped it. And of course, from then on, poor Kenneth, he got hit on the arm awful hard after that.
Yeah, of course, he was always.
I can tell.
Well, you told me to. He said, well, he says, I told you to hit hard enough, he said.
I can tell you about when Christmas come that year.
Yeah.
You know, they went to town then, and then they started drinking and tooting, and it got pretty well oiled up. But they bought presents for us kids, you know. I don't know what she bought for Mom or Dad, but I know they bought presents for us. Nice presents, you know, good. Came home with those presents, you know, and then they were half shot, you know. But they had a good time. They bought presents.
Oh, that was the best toys I think we'd ever got.
Heck yeah, they were.
We had a Caterpillar that you cranked up and it would go like everything. It was a dump truck and another truck. The three of us.
Yeah, they
You and I must have been in college.
I think you were.
I don't remember. I remember
Well, I was-
Kermit and Kenneth working there, but I didn't spend a lot of time with them.
In 1938, I finished the first semester and I was home. I worked over at the international, and for, you know, and that's when Kermit and Kenneth worked there.
We'd play Monopoly every night.
Oh boy.
You know, and of course it always got to be a big.
How about Parcheesi?
No,
No, it was Monopoly.
we play
For
Monopoly.
those guys, it was Monopoly.
Play Monopoly, and it always get to be a big argument, you know, selling and dealing. And so every night then he'd have to convince Kenneth to play, you know. Okay, then he'd finally say, one short game then, he'd say. He'd always lose, you know.
Well, he'd never sell.
Right.
He'd never sell. He'd always think that Kermit was taking advantage of him. So he wouldn't sell. He'd sit there and hold that stuff.
Well, you'd always have to convince him to play, you know, and he'd always lose.
They were funny.
Well, it would be